All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on something you use every single day, but probably don't think much about. We're talking about the invisible work that goes into designing the apps and websites in our lives. UI and UX design. Let's make the invisible, well, visible.
Okay, so have you ever been on a website and just felt completely lost? Or maybe you've downloaded a new app, tried to use it for like 30 seconds, and then just given up in total frustration? Yeah, we've all been there. And you know what? That feeling, it's not on you. It's actually a failure of design. And that's what we're going to dig into today. The whole world dedicated to stopping that exact feeling.
So to really get into this, we first need to get on the same page. We need a shared language. And that starts with understanding two of the most important and honestly most confused terms in the entire design world.
So what is the deal with UI versus UX? Let's break it down. Think of user interface, or UI, as the look. It's all the visual stuff, right? The buttons, the icons, the colors, the fonts, all the things you actually see on the screen. Now, user experience, or UX, is all about the feel. It's the entire journey. How easy was it? How frustrating? Did you get what you needed? You can have a beautiful, slick-looking button. That's great UI. But if you have no idea what happens when you click it or it takes you to the wrong place, that's terrible UX.
Someone once described this perfectly. They said, getting everyone to understand these terms is like singing from the same songbook. And that's so true. When the designers, the coders, the business people, when they all get what UI and UX mean, everything just clicks. That alignment, that's the secret sauce for making products that actually work for people.
Okay, so the team has a shared language. That's great. But who are they talking to? What's the point of all of this if they're not building something for the right people? And this brings us to the absolute core philosophy of all good design, which is putting you, the user, right at the center of everything.
This whole idea is called user-centered design, or UCD, and it basically flips the old way of doing things completely on its head. See, you don't just build something cool and then hope you can find people who want to use it. No way. You start with the people. You dig deep to understand what they need, what drives them crazy, what their goals are, and that understanding guides every single decision you make from there on out.
But the user can be kind of a vague concept, right? So how do you keep a real person in mind? Well, designers have a really cool tool for this. It's called a persona. It's basically a fictional character, but it's built from tons of real research about actual users. So you might create Sarah, the busy mom, or David, the tech-savvy student. And suddenly, the team isn't designing for some abstract blob. They're designing for a person. It lets them constantly ask, okay, but what would Sarah want to do right here? And once you have your persona, let's stick with Sarah, you can then map out her entire user journey. Think of it like a story map. You're literally plotting out every single step she takes from the moment she opens the app to the moment she achieves her goal. And you're not just mapping actions, you're mapping her thoughts and her feelings. This is where you find those aha moments. But more importantly, it's how you pinpoint the exact moments of frustration, the spots that you absolutely have to fix.
Okay, so we've built all this empathy. We know our user, we've mapped out their problems. Now what? How do you actually get from understanding the problem to creating a solution? Well, it's not some magical flash of genius. It's actually a pretty structured process. And that process is often called design thinking. If you look at these stages, it all makes perfect sense. Look, the first two steps, empathize and define, that's everything we've just talked about. It's only after you've done that groundwork that you get to the third stage, ideate. That's when you start brainstorming solutions. This whole framework is designed to make sure you're not just throwing random ideas at the wall, but that you're coming up with ideas that solve a real, well-understood problem for your user.
So when you get to that ideate stage, it's all about brainstorming. And the number one rule of brainstorming is simple: quantity over quality. Seriously. The goal is not to find the one perfect idea right away. The goal is to generate a massive flood of ideas. Get everything out there. Even the wild, crazy, that'll never work ideas are welcome, because you never know when one of those outlandish thoughts is the spark that leads to something brilliant.
Of course, after a good brainstorm, you're usually left with what looks like a hurricane of sticky notes all over the walls. It's organized chaos, at best. So how do you make sense of it all? That's where a mind map comes in.
It's such a great tool for bringing order to that chaos. You just put the main problem right in the middle, and then you start branching out, connecting all the related ideas and grouping themes together. It's how you turn that creative mess into an actual structured plan.
All right, so we've got a plan. The ideas are organized. The next big question is, how do you make it real? How do you take these concepts and turn them into something you can actually hold and, more importantly, show to people to get their feedback?
The very first step is something called a wireframe. And the best way to think about it is like an architect's blueprint for a building. It is super simple on purpose. We're talking just boxes and lines. No colors, no cool fonts, none of that. The only thing that matters here is structure and layout. It answers one simple question: what goes where? From that basic blueprint, you start building prototypes. And they come in a couple of flavors. You've got your low-fidelity prototype, which can be as simple as a bunch of sketches on paper that you literally flip through to show how someone would move through the app. It's fast, it's cheap, it gets the job done for testing a basic idea. Then, on the other end of the spectrum, you have a high-fidelity prototype. This thing looks and feels almost exactly like the final product. It's got the colors, the branding, and you can actually tap and click through it on a screen. With this, you're testing the real nitty-gritty of usability. So you might be thinking, why bother with the paper sketches? Why not just build the fancy one from the get-go? Well, there's a great saying, perfect is the enemy of good. See, the whole point of prototyping isn't to build a perfect thing on your first shot. The point is to learn. And you want to learn as fast and as cheaply as you can. Finding a major flaw with the paper sketch takes what, 10 minutes? Finding that same flaw after you've spent weeks building a detailed prototype, well, that's a whole lot more painful and expensive. Okay, so let's say we've prototyped and tested, and now we have something that works. It's functional. But what's the difference between something that just works and something that's truly great, something you love to use? Well, it comes down to a handful of really important principles, and they all boil down to one main idea: making things as simple as possible for the user. And this brings us to something called Tesler's Law. It's a really powerful idea. It basically says that for any given process, there's a certain amount of complexity that you just can't get rid of. It has to exist somewhere. You can't just make it vanish. So a great designer's job is to move that complexity from the user onto themselves. They do all the hard, complicated thinking so that for you, the user, the whole experience feels simple, intuitive, and just effortless. And that complexity that designers try to soak up, we have a name for it: cognitive load. Think of it as your brainpower tax. It's the amount of mental effort you have to spend just to figure out how to do something. You know that feeling when you look at a screen and it's just a wall of text and buttons and you don't know where to start? That's high cognitive load. The ultimate goal of great design is to get that load, that mental tax, as close to zero as humanly possible.
So how do they do that? Well, thankfully, they don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. They rely on these established rules of thumb, like Jacob Nielsen's famous usability heuristics. They're common sense principles, really. Like recognition rather than recall. That just means you shouldn't have to remember where a button is. The design should make it obvious. Or visibility of system status. If you're uploading a file, just show me a progress bar. Let me know what's going on. These aren't just some designer's random opinions. They are battle-tested laws for making things that are easy and intuitive to use. And really, this famous quote from Steve Jobs just nails the entire point of everything we've talked about today. It's not just about what it looks and feels like. Good design isn't just a pretty coat of paint. It's not decoration. It's the end result of all that deep empathetic work to understand the user. It's about creating something that's not just beautiful, but useful and intuitive, and maybe even a joy to use. At the end of the day, design is how it works. The funny thing is, when design is done really, really well, it becomes invisible. The experience feels so seamless, so natural, you don't even notice it. But now that you've seen all the work, all the research, the empathy, the strategy that goes into making things simple, are you ever going to look at an app the same way again? Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.